Thank you for logging on to the PawCast for the week of Monday, March 4th through Friday the 8th. Hello, I'm Mr. Andrews.
And I'm Miss Pegram.
And here's what's happening on our team this week.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the PawCast. For next week in ELA, short and simple this week, we're going to be doing poetry. It is such a super fun unit, but it is so understated. So I really want the kids to get geared up and ready for this upcoming week. Poetry is often misconstrued, and it's tough. And the poetry that we've done this far in the school year, the students have given me feedback of it was difficult or they didn't understand it. We just worked with a poem not too long ago, about a week ago, and it was hard for the students to break it down. So that's exactly what we're going to be working on, breaking down the poems just like you would break down a reading text, understanding the vocabulary, understanding the figurative language. We've talked about figurative language a little bit before, but that plays such a big part of poetry. So really looking forward to that coming up next week.
During the math portion of our school week, we're going to continue dividing fractions and whole numbers. Last week, students began using tape diagrams and number lines to help us to understand what it means when we have a whole and we share it in fractional parts, and then take a fractional part and share it into whole number groups. So we've developed a pretty good understanding of that, and now on Monday we're going to be solving problems, real world story problems, and also students are going to take an algorithm, whether it's a 1/4 divided into 4 groups, or maybe 4 groups divided into parts of 1/4, and they're going to create story problems from those algorithms to show that they have proficiency and understanding of what we're doing right now. We should have our assessment on Tuesday. Now remember, students need to be returning their ACC Women's Basketball Tournament field trip form. We'd like to have those back by Tuesday. Our field trip is on Thursday. And so students are going to need nothing except a bag lunch to be able to take with them. Now, if they take a soda or if they take a bottled water, be sure that those beverages are in plastic bottles. We can recycle those and we can throw away whatever bag or whatever container they bring their lunch in for the game. We'll be having lunch during halftime of Thursday's game. The students will also be doing a math activity while they're there, and hopefully it's going to help them not only understand a little bit more about the game of basketball, but it will also help them understand how fractions are truly in every part of our world, even and especially in sports. During the science portion of our week, we are continuing working with Newton's laws of motion. And we've done a pretty good job of developing Newton's first law. And then last week, we spent a pretty good portion of our week talking about Newton's second and third laws of motion. What we want to be able to do is to continue to develop our understanding of the vocabulary, inertia, force, friction, words like speed, velocity, acceleration, balanced force, unbalanced force, and then we topped it off last week with action and reaction forces. So as we develop those vocabulary understandings, we're also developing how they impact and how Sir Isaac Newton actually was able to develop his laws of motion. We're going to be looking at some videos on Monday and Tuesday, and students are going to look at those videos and try to identify what would be Newton's first law of motion in that segment of the video. Can they identify where Newton's second law and third law are being demonstrated? And then we should be ready for our assessment on Wednesday. Where in the United States am I this week? The selfie behind me gives a little bit of a hint. This state's Capitol building is the only Capitol in the world with an oil well underneath it. Kind of neat. More astronauts have come from this state than any other state. And this state was originally founded for the exclusive use of Native Americans. But in 1898, well, it was opened up to all settlers. This state has the most tornadoes of any state in the United States. And you know what? This state actually has an official meal. This is kind of a strange fact that I found. And this meal would contain chicken fried steak, fried okra, squash, cornbread, barbecue pork, biscuits, sausage and gravy, grits, corn, strawberries, black-eyed peas, and you couldn't have a meal without having some good old pecan pie to follow it all up. So this state has a steak meal, and that's what it contains. Also, this state holds or houses the National Cowboy Hall of Fame in its state capital city. So with all of that, how can you go wrong with determining this state and its state capital? You'll need to have both of those along with your mom and dad's signature. That should signify that they also watch the PawCast and are aware of all the cool things that we're going to be doing this week during the ELA, math, science, and certainly the activities of our school week in our classroom and throughout the school.
Where is Mr. Andrews? He's in the U.S. He's at a capital. Oh, which one will we learn about this week?
Let's have a great week together.